I've often heard it said that life is a marathon, not a sprint. Well, I've run a few marathons, and I've come to believe that actually life is a relay. I love watching the Olympics, and in particular, the 4x100-meter relay race. The athletes lined up, the gun goes off, and they explode out of the blocks. Hitting their stride, they hurtle down the track with just one objective in mind: to hand the baton to the next runner. In life, exploding out of the blocks is when you find what you're meant to do. You find your passion. Hitting your stride is a journey. You may not know the destination, but you're on the right path. And passing the baton is when you reach out to someone and share your knowledge, share your experiences. Usain Bolt's reaction time at the beginning of a race is 0.155 seconds. It took me a lot longer to explode out of the blocks. On December the 9th, in 2001, my wife Wendy died of cancer. The following year, I struggled with my grief, and many times I felt empty and alone. In December 2002, I got a phone call from my brother Peter. And after some small talk, he said, "Martin, I challenge you to a marathon." Now, I didn't hesitate, and I said, "You're on," and put the phone down. But the problem was, I didn't run. I was 47 years old, and I had always had a rocky relationship with sport. Now, this is baby Martin. A child only a mother could love. I mean, look at those cheeks. Now, back then I was known as a huggable child. And my size caused me issues at school. In England, the sports were soccer and cricket and rugby. And I was always picked last for the team. I'm what you call a reverse Olympian. They're very good at one sport, and I'm rubbish at lots of sports. But that night, Peter challenged me. I headed out. And I was wearing canvas tennis shoes. I was wearing cotton jogging pants, a fleecy top, a woolly hat, and big mitts. I ran 1K out and 1K back, and when I got home, I was cold and wet. And I thought to myself, this is ridiculous. I've just run 2 kilometers. I've got another 40.2 to go. I mean, how does anyone ever run a marathon? But I knew I couldn't back down from a challenge from my brother. But I needed help. So I joined the Sudbury Rocks Running Club. And they taught me about nutrition, hydration, shoes, pacing. And within a couple of months, my mileage had gone up from 5 kilometers to 10 kilometers. And in April, I ran the Ottawa Half Marathon. Now, before I knew it, July arrived, and I was on the start line of the 2003 Calgary Marathon. Next to me was Brother Peter. But to show you how big a challenge this was, my other younger brother, Andrew, had flown in from England. This was global sibling rivalry. The gun went off, and I flew from the start. But at the 2-kilometer mark, I stepped in a pothole and smashed. My knees were bleeding, my hands were all gravelly, but I got myself up, kind of brushed off and kept going, and managed to finish the marathon in just under 4 hours. However, in the brotherly stakes, Andrew was first, I was second, and Peter was third. But I was elated to have completed the marathon. Peter had reached out to me during my time of grief, and through running, I had found my passion. I had finally exploded out of the blocks. Usain Bolt's fastest relay split time is 8.7 seconds, and he hits his stride in 60 meters. And in the 100-meter relay, the path is very clear. You're in a lane, and you stay in it. However, in life, that path is not so clear. I continued my running journey, and in 2004, I went to the Boston Marathon. But in 2005, I signed up for a 4-month trip, cycling trip, in Africa. Along the way, I played sports. I played soccer and ping pong, and I ran with the kids. And I saw the power of sport. And it doesn't matter your age, your gender, your religion, your culture. Sport brings people together. I returned from the trip, but I didn't know what to do with the experience. Until one evening in February of 2009, a friend of mine introduced me to Right to Play. Now, Right to Play uses sport and play-based programs to teach children life skills, leadership, team building, conflict resolution. And that night, something clicked for me, and I knew I wanted to help. In the middle of 2009, I was training for my first 100-mile race, the Lost Souls Ultra. And while on a 5-hour training run, way too much time to think, I came up with the idea of Marathon Quest 250, to attempt to run 250 marathons in 1 year and try and raise $250,000 for Right to Play. So on January the 1st, 2010, I'm lined up with a group of friends on the 1A highway just outside of Cochrane, and it was minus 32 degrees. We headed off, and 5.5 hours later, we finished the marathon. 1 down, 249 to go. Now, during the year, my favorite days were Thursdays because I would go to a school and run a marathon. So I would go to the assembly, I'd talk to the kids about Right to Play, and then I'd head outside and I'd run 100 times around the soccer field or the school buildings. The kids would join me for the first couple of loops. And they would be cheering and having a great time, and then they'd go in for classes, and I'd keep going. And they'd wave at me from the window. At lunchtime, they'd come out, and they'd join me for 2 more loops, but they would feed me apples and carrots and Snickers bars. I was like a running guinea pig. I was the pet for the day. Then they'd go back in, and I'd keep going, and they'd wave at me, and after 6 hours of running around and around, at the end of the day, they'd come out and they'd run the last 2 loops with me. We'd finish the marathon and they'd cheer and we'd do high fives. But what blew me away was these children would give me their pocket money for the other kids. They understood how lucky they were with their schools and their homes and their toys. And then I told them about other children that didn't have the chance to play. Children who had to fetch water for 6 hours a day from the single tap in a village. Or in refugee camps where it was too dangerous to wander off and play. I could have had the worst week of running marathons, but on Thursdays when I ran at a school, my spirit soared. And during the year, I ran at 60 schools with over 12,000 kids, from kindergarten to grade 12. On December the 31st, 2010, marathon number 250 was complete, and we had raised $320,000 for Right to Play. I had found my path by using running to help underprivileged kids, and I was starting to hit my stride. Usain Bolt was a member of the gold medal winning 2012 and 2016 Jamaica 4x100 meter relay team. A critical aspect of their success was the successful passing of the baton. In February of 2015, I was hospitalized with a massive clot on the brain. Suddenly, from running multiple marathons, I needed help to go the 20 feet from the hospital bed to the washroom. My recovery was slow, and I was on a cocktail of drugs. But then, after a couple of months, I was given the okay to do short walks. And in May, I inched my way along to the finish line of the Calgary Marathon 5K walk. things were dark. Things had changed for me totally. Then, in late October, in the morning, one morning, my wife, Sue, showed me an article from the Guardian newspaper. And it was about the first marathon of Afghanistan. And in particular, it talked about a young woman named Zainab, who became the first Afghan woman ever to run a marathon. Normally for runners, the challenges are nutrition, hydration, and blisters. For Zainab, as she was training, it was verbal and physical abuse. When she was out training, people would yell at her, "Get off the streets, you're a prostitute," and they'd throw stones at her to stop her running. And she had to go back to her home and run around and around inside her walled garden to get her marathon training done. And when I read this, I vowed that if I could run again, I would go to the second marathon of Afghanistan and support the women. In the May of 2016, I ran the Calgary Marathon, and in late October, I was on a plane headed to Kabul. Arriving in Afghanistan, I met another marathon participant. Her name was Kubra, and she was supported by Free to Run, an NGO that works with girls and women in areas affected by war and conflict. Kubra's training had been interrupted by a bombing at her school, and she really felt she couldn't run the marathon. There was a 10K race that she was going to sign up for. But I said to Kubra, why don't we run together and try and finish the marathon in under the 7-hour cutoff? And she said yes. So at 8 a.m. on November the 4th, in the town of Bamiyan, which is 140 kilometers northwest of Kabul, we were lined up at the start line. The course was brutal. The start line elevation is 9,000 feet. It's an out and back race, and the out section is another 1,200 feet elevation gain. Kubra and I started running 9 minutes and walking 1, and we used this routine through the first half of the race, and the key to that was taking in regular nutrition, hydration, and electrolytes. We reached the halfway mark at 3 hours and 36 minutes. And at this rate, I knew we would not make the cutoff. And Kubra had started to have stomach cramps. We turned around and started our way back, doing 9 and 1s, but Kubra's cramps got worse and worse, and we started to walk. And the next 2 hours, I used all the knowledge that I had put together in those hundreds of marathons over a number of years to try and get Kubra through. And in essence, it came down to Kubra, focus on just 10 minutes. Forget about anything else, just keep moving and focus on 10 minutes. After 6 hours and 45 minutes, we still had 1 kilometer to go. We looked at each other and started running. And we crossed the line at 6 hours and 52 minutes with 8 minutes to spare. Now, Kubra had exploded from the blocks with the work she had done with the girls and women and promoting their rights over there. And she had hit her stride with her work with Free to Run. We had run together for 7 hours for a common goal, and Kubra had completed her marathon and achieved her dream. The baton had been passed. So now it's time to finish this relay. And I would like to introduce Giti Shirzad. Now, Giti came to Calgary from Afghanistan at the age of 7 with her parents and her younger sister, Gisu. She's studying at the University of Calgary, and Giti and her team are presently working on their very first fundraiser to help the victims of the recent bombing in Kabul. These funds will go to the families most in need. Giti is making a difference. And she's exploded from the blocks, and she's hitting her stride. So now, Giti, It's time to take the baton. So I ask you, have you started your relay yet? What will it take for you to explode out of the blocks? Find your passion and you're on your way. Hitting your stride can be a long journey, but the key is to have the openness to take a chance and the willingness to persevere. And at the end of the relay, it's time to pass the baton. Think about reaching out to someone. Share your experiences and make a difference in their life. Thank you.